Lessons After Session.
Yes, I am Jen.
I'm Trev. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Doing pretty good. How about you?
Good. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Long weekend,
Long
which was
weekend.
nice.
It is nice, but I don't know about you, but I always feel a little bit off.
Yes, I do too. I think, again, we're such routine beings that I think when routine gets off, we get off.
We do.
So, yes, I got to see you one night, though, on the weekend. That was fun.
It was fun. It was fun. It's always fun, I think, to be able to reconnect outside of the workplace, because then we're able to really it doesn't have to do with work. Our friendship can be kind of flourished in different directions because we get to really just be together.
I love that.
I do too.
Yes, I enjoyed having dinner.
Yes.
Okay, so we think, right? We were talking and we think we'd like to start a series on parental alienation or alienating behaviors, gatekeeping behaviors by parents who are divorced, going through a divorce or separation. It's a big topic.
Is it ever? It's a big topic and it's very gray. And I think that it's complicated because there's no DSM diagnosis for it, which makes it very elusive, right? Because it's usually a part of separation, divorce, co-parenting, and parents not being in the same home together. Even actually, sometimes it does happen with parents being in the same home, but that the courts are often involved in these cases a lot of times, and the courts don't really recognize it because there's not a clear, definitive way to really understand it. It reminds me a lot of the proving mental and emotional abuse kind of.
Yes,
It's so hard,
which we see all the time. It is, if there's not a mark, a bruise, cut, a slice, didn't happen.
Yep.
There's no proven abuse.
Right.
And really, alienation is abuse.
Huge.
It's abusive. I think that we should maybe begin the series with sort of talking about what it is and what it isn't, because I think sometimes it gets confusing. I know that in my work, I hear both people who definitely are onto it and can say this is occurring in my family, my life, and I'm like, yes. There are other people who throw that word out, and no, it doesn't really fit. So
I agree. I feel like it gets weaponized a lot in contested parenting relationships or conflictual, I guess, contested divorces, conflictual relationships. It gets weaponized and used because it is kind of catchy right now. Because I think for a long time, these behaviors kind of existed, but there wasn't really a definition as to what it was. And so you would see this where, families would go through a divorce. One parent would be really angry with the other parent and would openly share that hatred and anger with the children. And then that has a huge influence on the kids. The kids are upset because their family life is changing, and that is not something they asked for. They're looking for someone to blame. It's being handed to them on a platter by the parent that's upset. And I think for a long time that happened. And then as it gained more momentum and then the level of destruction it causes, there were some kind of titles put onto it. There's definitions given to it. And so then that has become infectious in a way that I think it's being overused and probably inappropriate use.
I would agree.
Which then I think is part of the reason why it's not recognized, because it's gray.
So I think when we talk about alienating behaviors, parental alienation, I think it's really important to first kind of recognize that it is a form of manipulation. It is designed to break apart a relationship between child or children and the other parent. It is willful. It is usually to gain some sort of leverage or one-upmanship, something in family court, whether it's to get more of the parenting time, to have this better quote unquote relationship with the child or children so that the children want to live with them and don't want a relationship with the other parent. It's manipulation. There's direct and indirect. but it is manipulation, whether it's direct or indirect. And it is a willful attempt to get in the way of this relationship between the children and other parents.
I see a lot of, yes, the intent being some sort of upper hand in a court battle, but I also see the intent being pain. How do I inflict pain upon this person that I have broken up with or that I am no longer with? And because I've been maybe rejected, or because maybe in some way I have a perception that they have abandoned me, or that they have hurt me, or they have done something to me, that I am coming out with my swords drawn and I'm fighting. And the best weapon I have, it's this kid
Mhm.
or kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is to inflict pain. Typically, like you said, the person who is the alienator is someone who maybe they were cheated on. They were the ones who didn't want the separation or divorce. They feel wronged in some way.
Mhm.
And so, like you said, the best way to hurt is to ruin this relationship between the other parent, child, and children. And in doing that, that usually does impact a court case
Mhm.
because then everything is in court. So let's first talk about direct and indirect.
Mhm.
Okay. So direct alienating behaviors, those would be you are directly telling your child or children horrible things about the other parent. You're directly saying they don't want you, they hate you, or they hate me and they hurt me. They're trying to take you from me. They are direct statements um, to the child in order to disrupt that relationship. Indirect, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about indirect, but indirect is more nuanced
Mhm.
and is a little bit more savvy sometimes.
Indirect, when I think of indirect, one of the scenarios that comes to my mind is, let's just take two parents who are going through divorce. It's contested. There's a lot of hostility, and you have the kids who've gone to the other parent's house and they come home, and the parent who's the alienator may say to these kids, "Oh, I bet it was terrible at mom's house. I bet you didn't do anything fun there," or did mom spend all her time sleeping this weekend? Or, you didn't eat anything healthy at mom's house. Boy, that's not surprising. Or, boy, you spent the weekend with your grandparents. Where was your mom at? There's a lot of digs to undermine the other parent, yes, what they're doing. So, a lot of critical over them just living their lives. Everything is made to seem as if they're failing, and they're
Absolutely.
failing the child.
Absolutely. Another kind of form of indirect might be that parent that when the child is going to the other parent's house, it's this long drawn out goodbye.
Mhm.
I know you're scared. Even if the child hasn't said they're scared of anything, you are going to be okay. You will be okay. If not, I can get you. Don't you worry. I can be sure you're going to be safe. Putting this thought that somehow they're not going to be safe with this
Mhm.
other parent. That's an indirect alienating behavior. Also, if the who's alienating, an indirect way to do that might be to kind of always be showing up for lunches, bringing, extra special treats and foods to the school, possibly making all the relevant doctor's appointments, dental appointments on their time so that they say, gosh, sorry that your mom, just isn't able to get these appointments scheduled, or I'm sorry, dad doesn't attend your doctor's appointments. Your health is pretty important. And the other parent may not even know. They may have had no choice in the scheduling, so they're busy working. There are all these ways to alienate, manipulate a child into thinking and believing that somehow this other parent doesn't care for them as much or is mean, evil, dangerous. And it's really, I think the core point in all of this is it damages the child.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The other parent, yeah, it's frustrating. It's a lot of things, but the emotional damage is to that child.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it goes, they're so far reaching. And I think with the direct and indirect, I feel like there's also intentional and unintentional in this too, where there are a lot of instances where emotions are high. There's no roadmap for hostility between co-parents. There's no roadmap for how to get divorced and separate well. Both parties are usually pretty emotionally dysregulated throughout that process. It's scary. It's a lot of
Absolutely.
change. There may be a lot of unintentional things like when kids come back from the other parent, hey, what'd you do this weekend? Or that didn't sound like a lot of fun. Or I'm sorry this didn't happen. Or I'm sorry that, like, a lot of questioning about the time they spent. I think that's maybe a good intention, right? I just want to learn about what you did when we weren't together. However, the child may perceive that as, why does mom want to know so much about what's going on with dad? And oh, she didn't like that I did this, or she didn't like that we did that. They internalize all of that. The biggest thing is to be able with intentional is you and the ability to look inside and recognize from my child's perspective, I can see how that may be putting them in the middle. And anytime you feel a sense of I'm putting my child in the middle, that's your red flag to back off from that behavior.
Absolutely. Well, and I think what you just kind of segued into, when I think of sort of unintentional alienating behaviors, I kind of put that in the category of not being parental alienation,
Mhm.
because I mean that speaks to this idea that initially, especially when there's a separation, there is a lot of dysregulation,
Mhm.
and the adult is learning how to cope with this new normal and this new reality, and they're going to make mistakes. That doesn't classify as being a direct, intentional manipulation in order to harm the other parent. Right. So when I think of sort of unintentional, I think of that as falling in a category of not fitting,
Yeah.
sort of that definition, that look of alienation.
And that's a great point because those behaviors have the ability to be changed because the intent wasn't to harm. The intent
Exactly.
was just, I'm trying to figure this out and I don't know what to do. Feels right to ask those questions. I'm curious. But then when you recognize it, you have the ability to change what the intention, with the intention being that there's so many horrible examples I can think of with intentional parent alienation. One thing that comes to mind that is probably one of the most extreme cases and is an accusation of physical or sexual abuse on the other parent. That is 100% intentional, right?
Absolutely.
The child comes home and let's just say there's a bruise. Let's say it's a rough and tough little boy who's in kindergarten and he's got a bruise on his knee. The child comes home and the parent says, my gosh, you've got a bruise. Who hit you? What happened? And then there's a manipulation of the child to get them to say something about maybe I was at dad's and we were being unsupervised. That turn, you kind of create this narrative based on a bruise that was completely innocent. It was just part of it. And then that becomes a presentation of you're abusive, physically
Oh,
abusive, so
yes.
the child can't be safe with you. I've seen instances where there's a new person brought into the other parent's life. And so then the kids go and spend time with dad and his new
Or mom. And
or mom and her new boyfriend. And then all of a sudden there's accusations of, oh, he touched you or oh, she touched you. In what way? Well, that to me sounds like sexual abuse. They shouldn't be touching you in that way. We're going to take that and we're going to report it. And then we're going to give it life. We're going to give it this narrative that fits my agenda of it's not safe for you to be there. So it's all very much taking little tiny innocent happenings of life and exploding them into catastrophic events.
100%. Taking normal events and blowing them up, exaggerating them in order to fit a narrative of reportable abuse, even to the point of wanting criminal charges that are not real. Obviously, the confusion for the child. And in our second part of our series, I think we should really dive into how this really harms the child.
Great.
So, so we've got that, the obvious damage to the child, trying to recognize what their own experience is
Mhm.
versus what they're being told their experience is. We're also now clouding or crowding a system that is already so overwhelmed with with abuse allegations. So now we've got false allegations that have to be investigated and go through a court.
Mhm.
And it causes distrust then amongst all of these different systems because nobody really knows because they've seen too many times a parent trying to harm their ex through lies and highly embellished things. It is just so damaging all the way around.
It really is. And that's a really good point too, because then you do have allegation, you do have abuse that legitimately is happening and it's not taken for word. A lot of times it's ignored, it's brushed over. Oh, this is a contested case. And we're just going to assume that in this divorce, things have gone south and they're just fighting and pushing one thing on each other. And there's a lot of cases that I've seen too where it doesn't get taken seriously as a result of being misused in so many other instances.
It's a really, really sad situation, which is why this is such an important topic. Such an important topic. I think that when you look at parents who are false allegations, when they are either outright making something up or, again, highly embellishing something, that is the definition of alienation, gatekeeping, really attempting to get in the way, if not completely wipe out another parent from the child or children's lives. And it is just so damaging. So, do you think we've made it clear what it isn't? So, unintentional things that maybe you say, especially when the separation first starts, right? You may ask too many questions. You may cry when you find out that there was a new partner over.
Mhm.
That isn't alienating
No.
because you're not attempting to do this on purpose. You're not attempting to cause pain to the other parent. Can you think of some other examples that are not alienation, where people kind of use that term?
And it's a very heavy term. And so one instance that comes to mind is taking ownership of your own behaviors. For example, let's just say that your way of coping with the changes in your life is to maybe indulge in a substance, maybe a drink. Or several drinks, and you have too much to drink, and the kids are with you, and they go home and they tell and mom, kind of capitalizes, oh, that's not okay, this kind of thing, because the mom doesn't want to normalize that it is okay that you drink in front of your children, although understandably so, right? We're human, we all make mistakes. And then the kids come back and they're a little scared. They're a little uncomfortable with being with you because there's been some alcohol use and mom was appalled by that and maybe said some things that against it. I've seen it where then that parent who had the drinks, well, it's not my fault. I'm allowed to do what I want. Mom or dad or the other parent on the other side is taking this and manipulating it, and I'm being alienated against.
Mhm. Yeah. So what you're saying is when there's a concrete concern.
Yeah.
So a parent gets really intoxicated in front of their children. The children share that with the other parent. That parent is concerned whether they call the other parent up, whatever, and are like, "Hey, this can't happen." A legitimate concern is not alienating.
No.
If there's a reasonable response
Mhm.
to a concern, that is not that parent trying to alienate. That's attempt at healthy co-parenting and keeping our kids safe and keeping communication open.
Yeah, and I think that term gets used loosely as a way. It's a defense mechanism.
Mhm.
I feel like I'm being attacked, so I'm going to put it back on you and be you alienating me
Yes.
by the way that you're handling this and influencing the way the kids feel. When in actuality, it was your behavior that scared the children. It wasn't the way the parent responded to it. They responded to it, maybe the best, maybe not the best. Your way, your behavior is what initiated that feeling in the children, not that the parent created some fable about what was going on.
Exactly. I think one other kind of example of when it's not alienation is kids, as we know, having them, they're going to go through all sorts of developmental stages and times of drastic mood changes. They're going to prefer one parent over the other and flip flop that numerous times. That happens when you're in a two household. It just occurs. And I think I sometimes hear that, oh, I'm being alienated because my teenager now really wants to, stay at dad's
Mhm.
instead of come over to mom's, or vice versa. Again, we look at, is there an intent? Is that other parent coaching, encouraging to not go there, lying, exaggerating, or is this just the natural stage of kids? That is not alienation when it's just the natural stage. And you'll know that, if you kind of get some education and understanding on all the developmental stages with children and what comes with that. But also, if you're in healthy communication with the other parent, so you can say, "Hey, I just want to let you know, such and such said this to me. I've let them know they do not have a choice." Because that's the other piece, is when parents start giving their kids choices
Mhm.
and making it their decision. They're 7, they're 8, they're
Mhm.
9. They are really attempting to then get in the way and get that child aligned with them.
Yes. Yes. And that's a tricky one too, right? I think that's a even has some different circumstances that don't always, a child can feel that they have a choice. I think the difference is how that parent handles that. But you're right, that's definitely again another branch of this alienation tree that's just huge.
It's so huge because then from that tree, I also think about the fact of when alienation is successful, and the most damaging is when the child joins the alienator. There's a lot of things that can be done through therapy and other means, if that are successful, if that child hasn't joined. Once that child joins with the alien, it's a rough road, and we'll hit that
Well,
in our next
that
series because
yeah.
we're going to talk about how this impacts kids.
Yeah, and a lot of times I do recognize there is some sort of a kind of a pattern to it, and what we have to consider is each parent is different, each child is different, the ages are different, the circumstances are different. There's no two situations that are the same,
Oh,
but there's a lot of consistencies within how children react to certain behaviors and how the behaviors are presented. It's crazy to me how textbook it follows from an intentional alienator. And what's crazy is I really don't know that intentional alienators, they recognize what they're doing is wrong, but they don't. Does that make sense? It's like they know it's wrong because they're doing it as a way to punish or hurt someone. So you have to internally, if you have any type of engage in there, no, I am purposely inflicting pain on someone else.
but then there's some sense of self-righteousness that
Yes.
they're entitled to do that.
Exactly. There's justification up one side and down the other, and that makes them be innocent even in their quest for that.
Fabulous point.
Yeah. So there's a lot of pieces to this. I think as we kind of dive through it, we're going to uncover a lot of different things. I think it's really helpful too to have other scenarios. A lot of people can probably relate to, oh, dang, I have that. I've experienced that. My child has done that, or my ex does that, or did that, or, that helps
Yes.
too to feel not so alone because it is a really lonely road running through this.
It can be excruciating.
Mhm.
It can completely destroy that parent's life,
Absolutely.
their ability to function. So,
And I think that's, yeah, again, another piece, like
another piece.
how do we come back from that and how do we heal?
Well, we've got, this is going to be a series. I don't think we can say how many parts.
I don't know that we can either.
We're just going to keep um, peeling the onion.
I love that. I'm gonna keep
Okay.
eating lasagna the whole time,
Awesome.
bite after bite.
Well,
Okay.
thanks everyone. We'll see you next time.
Okay.